It was a bright Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when the sun pressed its golden warmth on the city and made everything appear sharper, almost unforgiving. At the center of the city's busiest shopping district stood a well-known restaurant, a place where businessmen, couples, and families alike gathered to show off their good taste. The waiters
This food is amazing.
I know.
It's like if you guys to show right something.
I know, right. And the company's even better.
moved briskly between tables, the clinking of glasses and chatter blending into a hum of social life. This was where Lillian found herself that day, seated across from her husband, Marcus. Marcus had insisted on the outing. He wanted to be seen as always. He liked attention, liked the eyes of strangers lingering on him as though he were someone important. Lillian, on the other hand, had never been fond of spectacle. She preferred quieter moments, time with family, walks in the park, cooking simple meals at home. Yet here she was, dressed in a modest maroon dress that she had chosen carefully, hoping to look presentable beside her husband. But Marcus wasn't the kind of man to be satisfied with quiet effort. He was the type who constantly compared, measured, and judged, especially when it came to appearances. Lillian knew this, but nothing could have prepared her for what he did that day. They had barely opened the menu when Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing at her in thinly veiled disdain. His voice, dripping with sarcasm, carried far louder than necessary. "Maybe you should skip the dessert menu this time, Lillian. I mean, it's not like you need any more pounds added, right?" The words were sharp, cutting deeper than any knife. But it wasn't just what he said, it was where he said it. Around them, several heads turned. A group of women at the next table gasped softly, their eyes darting toward Lillian before lowering in awkward pity. A couple of young men across the room snickered, whispering under their breath. Even the waiter, frozen mid-step, shifted uncomfortably as though he had accidentally intruded on something private. Lillian felt the blood rush to her cheeks, her body stiff with shock. Her fork trembled in her hand. She wanted to vanish, to shrink into herself until no one could see the humiliation written across her face. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding against her chest, louder than the chatter around her. Marcus wasn't done. He leaned closer, still loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Honestly, you should think about a gym membership. It's embarrassing walking around with a wife who doesn't know how to take care of herself." Each word was a dagger. The shame was unbearable, pressing down on her like a heavy weight she couldn't lift. People were staring openly now, their curiosity and judgment mingling in the air like poison. Lillian swallowed hard, forcing back the tears that threatened to spill. She knew if she cried here, in front of all these strangers, it would give Marcus the satisfaction of complete victory. So she sat still. She forced a small, brittle smile as though his words had slid off her. Inside, however, she was breaking. The rest of the meal was a blur. She barely tasted the food, her appetite gone. Marcus ate heartily, oblivious or perhaps pleased by the damage he had inflicted. He chatted about his work, about the business deals he was closing, about how everyone respected him, every word a reminder of his arrogance. When they finally left the restaurant, Lillian kept her gaze fixed on the pavement, refusing to meet the sympathetic glances of strangers. The walk to the car felt endless. Marcus strode ahead confidently, never looking back, as though he had proven some point only he understood. That night, as they returned home, Lillian locked herself in the bathroom. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. For the first time, she didn't just see herself, she saw what Marcus had painted in cruel words. A woman who had become invisible, undervalued, and disrespected. She touched her cheeks, still hot from shame, and felt something shift deep inside her. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was anger. Quiet, simmering but steady. Marcus's words had wounded her, but they had also awakened a fire. For too long she had endured his criticisms, his superiority, his need to belittle her to elevate himself. For too long she had let herself believe she wasn't enough. But as she stood there, staring at the woman in the mirror, she realized something important. She was still here. She still had a choice. And maybe, just maybe, Marcus's cruelty would become the very spark that ignited her transformation. That night, while Marcus snored carelessly in bed, Lillian sat up in the living room thinking. The echoes of laughter and whispers from the restaurant still haunted her, but instead of drowning in them, she allowed them to fuel her resolve. She would change, not just her body but her life. She would become someone Marcus could no longer mock, someone who could stand tall under any gaze. And when the time came, she would make him regret the day he had ever tried to humiliate her. The following days after the restaurant incident dragged like a heavy chain around Lillian's heart. She carried herself through each morning as though nothing had happened, but the echoes of Marcus's cruel words clung to her like shadows. At work, she caught her colleagues' curious glances when she walked into the office kitchen. It was as though the whispers from that crowded restaurant had spread further than she realized. Or maybe it was just her imagination magnifying every look, every pause in conversation. Either way, the humiliation refused to leave her. Marcus, on the other hand, seemed to have already forgotten the scene. He carried himself as he always did, confident, self-absorbed, utterly unaware of the storm he had stirred inside his wife. He laughed with his friends over the phone, boasted about his successes at work, and when he looked at Lillian, it was with the same dismissive gaze that had cut her down at the restaurant. But inside Lillian something had shifted. Each night, after Marcus had gone to bed, she would stay awake, sitting quietly in the living room. She thought about her life, about the woman she had become, and about the version of herself she had long buried under years of compromise. She remembered how vibrant she once was, back when she was younger, before the weight, before Marcus's endless criticisms, before life had stripped her confidence away. That woman still lived inside her. She just needed to find her again. It began with small steps. On the third night after the humiliation, Lillian opened her laptop and searched for home workout routines. The internet was flooded with them, videos, guides, transformation stories. She scrolled through pictures of women who looked like her, women who had been underestimated, mocked, or overlooked, but had risen from the ashes with renewed strength. Their before and after stories struck something deep within her. They were proof that change was possible, not for Marcus, not for anyone else, but for themselves. She bookmarked a handful of videos and promised herself she would start. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, she quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Marcus. The air was cool, the house still. She rolled out an old yoga mat in the corner of the living room and pressed play on the first video. It was awkward at first, her body stiff, her breathing unsteady, her movements clumsy. She stumbled, sweated, and nearly gave up after 10 minutes. But then she remembered Marcus's voice echoing in her head. It's embarrassing walking around with a wife who doesn't know how to take care of herself. The sting of those words pushed her forward. She clenched her jaw, straightened her back, and finished the workout no matter how messy it looked. When it was over, she collapsed onto the mat, her chest heaving, her body aching, but her spirit alive. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stirring in her chest that wasn't shame. It was resolve. Days turned into weeks, and Lillian built quiet consistency into her mornings. She woke up early, trained before the sun rose, and returned to bed just in time for Marcus to wake up. He never noticed the faint scent of sweat on her skin, or the way her body trembled slightly from exertion. He was too absorbed in his phone, his work, his world. Food became another silent battleground. Lillian began to make subtle changes. Less sugar in her tea, smaller portions on her plate, healthier snacks tucked into her work bag. At first it felt like denial, but soon she realized it was empowerment. Every small choice she made was another step away from Marcus's cruelty and toward the woman she wanted to become. There were temptations, of course. Nights when Marcus ordered pizza, deliberately waving greasy slices in her direction with a smirk, as though daring her to break. She would smile faintly, take a small bite, but no more. She had a vision now, a quiet picture in her mind of standing tall, no longer feeling invisible. That vision was stronger than the fleeting pleasure of indulgence. Still, the process wasn't just physical, it was deeply emotional. In the quiet moments, when exhaustion pulled at her, doubt would whisper, "What if you fail? What if this changes nothing?" But then she would remember that night in the bathroom, staring at her reflection, and the humiliation in the restaurant. Those memories became her fuel. Months began to pass, and though the changes were subtle, they were undeniable. Her clothes fit a little looser. Her face looked slightly sharper in the mirror. Colleagues began to comment, some kindly, others with surprise. "Lillian, you look different," they would say, and she would smile politely, holding her secret close. But Marcus remained blind. Or perhaps he chose to remain blind. He still mocked her occasionally, still criticized her choices, still dismissed her efforts. What he didn't know was that with every insult, he was unknowingly pushing her closer to the transformation that would one day shake the foundation of their marriage. One evening, as Lillian folded laundry in the bedroom, Marcus strolled in, scrolling through his phone. Without looking at her, he said casually, "Don't stay up too late tonight. You know how cranky you get in the mornings? And maybe try cutting back on those midnight snacks. I don't want to be embarrassed at the next company event." Lillian paused, the shirt in her hands frozen mid-fold. She didn't respond. She didn't argue. She didn't even look at him. She just smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hid 1,000 unspoken promises. Because in her heart she already knew, the day of reckoning was coming. Marcus might not see it yet, but she did. And when the time came, her transformation wouldn't just be about proving him wrong. It would be about reclaiming herself, her dignity, her worth. For now she kept her silence. But within that silence lived a storm Marcus could never imagine. By the time spring melted into summer, Lillian's life had quietly shifted into an entirely new rhythm. The woman who once shrank under Marcus's cruel remarks was beginning to stand a little taller, though she carried her changes like secrets stitched into the fabric of her daily routine. Her mornings had become sacred. She no longer stumbled through half-hearted movements. Now she pushed herself with purpose. The living room that once echoed only with silence now vibrated with the sound of her determination, the steady beat of her shoes on the mat, the rhythm of her breath, the occasional groan as she pushed past limits she never believed she could cross. At first, the transformation had been hidden, visible only in the way her clothes loosened slightly at the seams, or how her skin seemed to glow after a workout. But as the months stretched on, her reflection told a different story. Her face looked sharper, her jawline more defined. The heaviness around her waist had begun to fade, replaced by subtle curves of strength and grace. Her colleagues at work noticed. They whispered in hallways, some with admiration, others with envy. Compliments found their way to her ears. "Lillian, you look amazing. What's your secret? I hardly recognized you." She smiled politely, but inside she held those words like small victories, proof that the journey she had chosen was more than a dream. Marcus, however, was still blind to the storm unfolding beneath his roof. He was too consumed by his own vanity, too self-absorbed to notice the miracle taking place before him. To him, Lillian remained background noise, useful for keeping the house in order, presentable enough to stand beside him, but never worthy of true attention. And yet, change has a way of demanding recognition. It began one evening when Marcus invited a few friends over for drinks. They lounged in the living room, laughing loudly, glasses of whiskey in their hands. Lillian moved quietly around them, serving snacks and ensuring everyone had what they needed. She wore a simple fitted blouse and jeans, nothing extravagant, but enough to showcase the months of effort she had poured into herself. One of Marcus's friends, a tall man with a sharp gaze, nearly choked on his drink when Lillian walked past. "Marcus," he said, nudging him with a grin, "you didn't tell us your wife was turning into a model. Look at her, she's glowing." The room chuckled. Marcus, caught off guard, gave a forced laugh. "Yeah, she's been trying something new, I guess." His tone was dismissive, but the slight crease on his forehead betrayed his discomfort. For the first time, Marcus was seeing what others saw, a woman no longer weighed down by shame but rising into her own beauty. That night, after the guests had left, Marcus eyed Lillian with suspicion. "What's going on with you?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Who are you trying to impress?" Lillian looked at him calmly, her eyes steady. "Myself," she said simply. The words unsettled him. He expected excuses, explanations, maybe even guilt. But what he saw in her gaze was a quiet confidence that had never been there before. As weeks turned into months, the cracks in their marriage grew. Marcus's mocking comments became less frequent, replaced by uneasy silences. He watched her more closely now, as though afraid of what he might lose if her transformation continued. But instead of supporting her, he tightened his grip, reminding her of his authority, belittling her choices, and trying to cast shadows over her progress. Yet the stronger he tried to pull her down, the higher she seemed to rise. At work, opportunities began to open for Lillian. Her newfound energy and confidence spilled into her performance, catching the attention of her superiors. She was no longer the timid woman who avoided eye contact during meetings. She spoke with clarity, presented ideas with conviction, and carried herself with poise. Her boss once remarked, "Lillian, I don't know what's changed, but keep it up. You're becoming someone we can rely on." Outside of work, she expanded her transformation beyond the physical. She read books on self-growth, practiced mindfulness, and began to dream again, dreams of a life where she wasn't defined by Marcus's cruelty. Her family noticed the change too. During a visit to her sister's house, her younger niece exclaimed, "Auntie Lillian, you look like a princess." The innocence in the child's voice nearly brought her to tears. For years she had felt invisible even to those closest to her. Now she was shining in ways she hadn't thought possible. But with every victory, Marcus's insecurities deepened. His friends' casual compliments about Lillian became daggers to his pride. He began to question her more, to demand her attention, to remind her of her place. One evening he snapped, Don't forget, no matter how much weight you lose, you're still my wife. Don't get any ideas." Lillian didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was more powerful than any argument. Inside, she knew the truth. Marcus feared her transformation because it exposed his weakness. He had built his confidence on her submission, and now that she was rising, his foundation was crumbling. By the time autumn arrived, Lillian's transformation was undeniable. She walked into a room and people noticed. Not just her figure but her presence, commanding, graceful, untouchable. She was no longer the woman who sat trembling in a restaurant, humiliated by her own husband. She was becoming someone entirely new. And though Marcus tried to cling to control, deep inside, Lillian knew something he didn't. The final act of her journey wasn't just about transformation. It was about revenge, the kind that required no shouting, no cruelty, no spectacle. The kind of revenge that came simply by living beautifully, confidently, and unapologetically. The kind of revenge that would leave Marcus speechless when the moment finally arrived. The night of Marcus's company gala arrived with the kind of anticipation that made the city glitter brighter than usual. It was the firm's most prestigious annual event, an evening where executives paraded their achievements and families put their finest selves on display. Marcus had been preparing for weeks, rehearsing his speeches, tailoring his suit, ensuring every detail would reflect his status. For him, the gala was a stage and he was determined to shine. For Lillian, however, this night meant something far greater. It was her moment of reckoning, the unveiling of months of quiet labor, silent tears, and iron resolve. The transformation that had been blooming in private was finally ready to be seen in full. In the days leading up to the event, she had carefully chosen her outfit. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was unforgettable. A sleek, emerald green gown that draped elegantly over her figure, highlighting every curve and line her hard work had carved. The fabric shimmered softly under the light, neither too bold nor too modest, just enough to command attention without asking for it. She paired it with subtle jewelry, a touch of makeup that illuminated her natural beauty, and an air of confidence that no amount of cruelty could diminish. When she walked into the living room that evening, ready for the gala, Marcus nearly dropped his cufflinks. For a fleeting moment, his mask cracked. He stared at her, eyes widening in disbelief. This was not the woman he had ridiculed months ago. This was someone radiant, poised, breathtaking. But pride is a stubborn wall, and Marcus rebuilt his mask quickly. He cleared his throat, fastening his tie. "You look decent," he muttered, his tone deliberately flat. Lillian smiled faintly, unbothered. She didn't need his validation. Tonight the world would see her. The venue was a grand hotel ballroom, adorned with sparkling chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests in gowns and tuxedos mingled beneath the golden lights, their laughter and conversations weaving together into an elegant symphony. As Marcus and Lillian entered, heads began to turn. Whispers rippled through the crowd, eyes lingering not on Marcus, but on the woman beside him. "Is that Marcus's wife?" someone whispered. "She looks incredible. I barely recognized her." Lillian walked with calm grace, each step steady, her chin lifted just enough to command respect. She didn't flaunt, she didn't seek approval, she simply existed in her power, and that alone was enough to captivate the room. Marcus, however, felt the shift. For years, he had been the center of attention, his wife blending quietly into the background. But tonight, the balance had changed. He was no longer the star. Lillian was. And it unsettled him more than he could admit. Throughout the evening, colleagues and acquaintances approached them. Men complimented Lillian openly, some even with awe in their voices. Women leaned in, eager to know her secret, whispering admiration as though she had unlocked some hidden truth. Even Marcus's superiors, who rarely acknowledged her, offered warm smiles and compliments. Marcus forced laughter, tried to brush it off, but inside his pride was cracking. The very thing he had mocked her for had become the source of her triumph, and it was happening in front of everyone who mattered to him. At one point during the evening, Lillian found herself standing near the refreshment table, sipping water. A group of women approached her, executives' wives who had once looked past her without interest. This time, their eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Lillian, you look absolutely stunning tonight," one said. "You must tell us, what inspired such a change?" another pressed. Lillian's lips curved into a calm smile. Her answer was simple yet powerful. "I realized I was worth the effort." The women exchanged glances, their admiration deepening. It wasn't just her physical transformation they respected. It was the strength in her words, the quiet dignity she carried. From across the room, Marcus watched, his jaw tight. He had always believed Lillian's worth was tethered to him, that without his presence she was invisible. But now, surrounded by attention and admiration, she was proving him wrong. Later that night, Marcus tried to reclaim control. As they stood by the hallway, he leaned close, his voice a harsh whisper. "Don't get carried away. You think this little makeover makes you better than me?" Lillian turned to him slowly, her eyes steady, her voice calm. "I don't need to be better than you, Marcus. I just need to be better than the woman you tried to break." The words struck like lightning. Marcus froze, his arrogance faltering, his face betraying the faintest flicker of fear. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream for Lillian. She danced, laughed, and conversed with confidence she had never known before. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was living. Every step, every smile, every compliment was a thread weaving the tapestry of her rebirth. When the gala drew to a close and they drove home, silence filled the car. Marcus gripped the wheel tightly, his mind tangled in resentment and confusion. Beside him, Lillian gazed out the window, the city lights reflecting in her calm eyes. She wasn't thinking about Marcus or his pride or his cruelty. She was thinking about herself, about the woman she had fought to reclaim, and the life she was ready to embrace. And deep within her, a quiet certainty grew. The night had been more than a reveal, it had been a promise. A promise that the best of her was yet to come, and Marcus would have no choice but to witness it. The ride home from the gala had been drenched in silence. The hum of the engine, the faint wail of distant Lagos traffic, and the occasional turn of the tires on the smooth road were the only sounds between them. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned pale, while Lillian gazed out of the window, the lights of the city glittering across her calm, unreadable face. When they finally pulled into the driveway of their Ikoyi home, Marcus killed the engine but didn't move. For once, he didn't feel like the master of his world. His pride, polished and paraded all night, had cracked under the weight of Lillian's quiet glow. He cleared his throat. "Lillian," he began, his voice unusually soft. She didn't turn. She opened her door, stepped out gracefully, and began walking into the house. Marcus scrambled after her. Inside, the house was dark except for the soft glow of the chandelier in the living room. Lillian placed her clutch on the console table and began removing her jewelry, her movements slow and deliberate. Marcus stood there watching her, his chest tightening. For months he had ridiculed her, dismissed her, treated her as an extension of his ego. Yet tonight the world had seen what he had been too blind, too arrogant to see. "Lillian," he tried again, his voice cracking. "Please, just listen to me." She turned then, her eyes calm, cool, steady. "I'm listening." Marcus swallowed hard. His pride battled with his desperation. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know I've been cruel. I said things I shouldn't have said. Hurt you in ways I can't take back. Tonight, seeing you like that, I realized I was wrong." Her expression didn't change. She simply tilted her head, waiting. "You're beautiful, Lillian," he whispered, the words foreign on his tongue. "You always were, but I was too proud, too stupid to admit it. I let my ego control me and I hurt you because of it." He faltered, shame cutting into him. "I'm sorry." The silence that followed was heavy. The kind of silence that demanded more than words. Lillian set down her earrings and folded her arms. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but every word was sharpened steel. "Do you know what hurt the most, Marcus? It wasn't the names you called me. It wasn't the laughter you shared at my expense. It was the fact that I believed you. For years I looked in the mirror and saw myself through your eyes. And it almost broke me." Marcus's throat tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, but she held up her hand. "But then," she continued, "I stopped listening to you. I started listening to me. To the woman I knew I could be. And tonight, the world didn't just see me, they saw what you tried to bury. You didn't just insult me, Marcus. You tried to erase me." Her words hit him like blows. He staggered back slightly, shame flooding his face. "Lillian, No," she cut in, her tone final. "I don't need your apology. Not anymore. You want to say you're sorry because you see what you've lost. But I didn't go through fire just to let you hand me ashes." Her words hung in the air like a verdict. Marcus lowered his gaze. For once, the man who prided himself on control, who strutted with arrogance in every room, was stripped bare. Lillian turned, slipping off her heels, her steps soft but resolute as she moved toward the bedroom. At the doorway she paused, looking back one last time. "I don't hate you, Marcus. But I will never be the woman you mocked again. You will never have that power over me." And with that, she disappeared into the room, leaving Marcus standing alone in the dim light of the living room. His pride shattered, his apology unanswered, and the weight of his own choices pressing down on him like chains. For Lillian, the night was not just an ending. It was the beginning of her true freedom.